in the live chat.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right.
So if they have no questions, then we'll move to the response sheet.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll use the live chat here, or students can unmute and ask questions. Uh, so shall we start with the questions from response sheet first?
Sure. I could start with that, and in the
Sure.
meantime, if they come up with questions in the live,
Yeah.
and I'll
Yeah.
answer them after that. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So the first question is about in is intra between species and inter within species? Someone's asked. I don't know exactly what which slide it refers to, but in generally, in the life history lecture, intra is between individuals of the same species, and inter is between individuals belonging to two different species. Uh, then, yeah. The next question is about the optimal clutch size that I referenced in the Whitham Wood study, uh, which was 12 eggs. So they're asking if optimum clutch size means that 12 chicks were hatched and produced the maximum number of offspring. So here the answer is that an optimum clutch size of 12 eggs refers to the maximum number of eggs that produced the maximum number of live offsprings. So if they basically laid more than 12 eggs, uh, lesser than less number of chicks survived. So 12 is that number which leads to hatching of maximum number of live chicks, and for this particular bird. And they're also asking, since it's a very skewed distribution, should one not consider the median instead of the average value? But yeah, looking at the plot, it doesn't look very skewed, and also it's based on a very large data set, and I'm expecting that the authors would have definitely tested for normality before reporting means, with the mean clutch size. Is the person around who asked this question?
Please unmute yourself if the person is here.
Yeah. Okay. All right. uh yeah, if the person has any doubt, they can write to me later. Yeah. And so I'm just moving to the third question, where someone's asked about what does density independent mean when I talked about R selected and K selected species table. So basically, anything that is density independent uh, does not change with the size of population at a particular place. And what it basically means is that the number of individuals that are there in a site, uh, basically that place can support many more individuals. So they are not restricted by any particular carrying capacity. And as a result of it, they are not competing between each other for food or any other resources. The interactions that take place in such a population where the number of individuals is far below the carrying capacity that a habitat can hold, that is usually known as density independent. On the other hand, when we talk about case selected species which are larger, uh, they are often competing, individuals are often competing amongst themselves. And in such cases, density dependence becomes a factor. So basically, competition is very low when the population size is very small, but as the population increases, competition between individuals keeps increasing with increase in population size. And we are going to talk about it in greater detail in the bird populations lecture, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. Yeah. Any other clarification required here from the person who asked the question? If not, then I'll move on to the next question. Someone's asked about what does the y-axis mean in the plot? Uh, yeah, in the plot which talks about, I think, reproductive investment, fecundity, and adult survival. So basically, yeah, I'm sorry for the confusion. I should have ideally made two plots. So the y-axis can refer to fecundity, or it can also refer to adult survival, depending on which slope you are looking at in that particular graph. And
वहाँ स्पेस भी कम होता है इसलिए लेफ्ट पे बैठा जाता होगा ड्राइवर पूरा अपना बैठेगा ना कोई लंबा है
Can you please unmute the student if you're not speaking asking the question or discussing with the professor? Thank you.
Okay, then someone's asked me about a citation which they can't read, but I have no idea which slide they are talking about. So if they want a specific answer, they can write to me about it. Then the sixth question is, okay, this is, I think, referring to the study on, okay, they haven't referenced exactly what it is, so I'm just going to guess. It's about the optimal foraging curve with the starlings, and they're asking me if that particular study tracked the bird over multiple visits, and yes, that is indeed the case. So basically, they observed the birds visiting a patch and catching these yellow jacket larvae over multiple visits, and the plot basically shows the data summarized over all those visits. The next question is seventh question, which is why does the utility function change its shape induced by ambient temperature? So if you look at the utility function curves, uh, what we're referring to is how the bird is with respect to its condition, its body condition. So if it's in a warm place and it's well fed, so it's not just the temperature, the ambient temperature is basically an index of the body condition of the bird. So if it's in a warm place, and it's energetically stable, not very hungry, then what happens is, like whatever, even if it has fewer seeds available, losing those fewer seeds is more costly than the risk of winning, taking a chance on maybe winning lots of seeds or not winning any seeds at all. So that loss is greater than gambling for a bigger reward. So that's why we have this concave down kind of curve, which explains this behavior for birds which are well fed in a warm place. On the other hand, birds which are cold and hungry, so they basically need to feed quickly to increase their energy and improve their body condition. In such cases, it has to be that gambling where there is a chance of eating lots of seeds, even though there might be might come across patches where there might be nothing. That has to be more profitable than losing what few seeds they have, and that particular phenomenon is explained by a concave up kind of plot. So that's the answer. Do you need any more clarification regarding this? Okay, fine. So someone's asked, I think related to the same question, is it valid to study foraging behavior in birds using artificial food sources like feeders? Does this behavior change compared to their feeding under natural circumstances? So the answer to this question is that,
You do a check?
yeah, hello? So the answer to this question is that obviously it's very difficult to replicate the results of studies that are done in the lab in controlled environment in the natural setting, and you might never be able to find the same results. But sometimes we are interested in understanding the influence of one particular factor. Like maybe we want to understand what is the effect of temperature on a bird's feeding behavior or survival or anything. There is no way to directly test it in natural conditions because there are multiple factors influencing that bird. It could be it's a mix of predators, diseases, temperature, moisture. There might be multitude of factors that are simultaneously affecting that particular behavior that you want to look at. So you can never it's very, very difficult to tease apart the effect of one single effect. So in such cases, these kind of experimental studies become very, very valuable. Often the kind of observational studies that people like me do in field, the result is often very correlational. So what we find is, some kind of association between a particular behavior and some factor, like some environmental factor, resources, or other species, diseases, parasites, things like that. But we are never able to establish if uh, one of them is causing this change that we are looking at. And for that, unfortunately, there's no other way to do it than controlled environment in the lab and setting it up like in an experimental setup where we can really look at the effect of the factor that we are interested in on the behavior of birds. Yeah. Okay. I'll just move on to the next question. So the question is this measured with respect to beak length? I really don't understand what particular thing this question refers to. Amrita, do you know?
Yeah, let me check and get back to you.
Okay.
You can answer the next question.
Okay, fine. Okay, so someone's asked, how are days in the breeding season longer in the temperate zone than in the tropics? So that is just the angle of the sun in summer. So basically, if any of you have traveled to European countries or North America in summer, you'll see that the sun sets well after 9, 10 o'clock in the night. So that's just how temperate areas are because of the angle of the sun. The daylight hours are really long, and in fact, in the Arctic Circle, it's just forever lit up. So that allows a lot of time for birds to forage in the temperate areas. And that's one of the hypotheses behind why certain birds have bigger, they produce more eggs than their sister species in or the same species in the tropical areas. Okay. Coming to the next question, okay, when will we be learning various acts that concern wildlife, especially birds? So she has asked some questions about conservation and pet trade and all, and we will be addressing this question on the lecture in bird conservation, which happens later in the series. Yeah. Okay. So I'm done with the listed questions here. I can take questions which are here in the chat box. Okay.
Yeah, so we answered questions from the discussion forum, I think. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So
So
I'm
the
just
one question, sorry,
yeah.
please.
Yeah. So the chat questions I can take, right?
Yeah, sure, please.
Okay. So first question is, how and why does laying eggs vary with altitude, upper, lower Himalayas and foothills? So So we know about this across latitudes, which is what I talk about in my study. If something similar is happening across altitudes in the Himalayas, I'm not aware of any study like that, although it might be happening, but sorry, I'm not aware of any study that has documented it. Then the next question is, why does it happen that when a particular species starts reproduction at an early age, that the reproductive success is low? What may contribute to this phenomenon? So there are multiple factors. One is just the body condition of the bird. So if it's really early, then it's not body is not mature enough. The condition is not good enough, so it might just produce fewer eggs in the initial few bouts of breeding. Second thing that often contributes to fewer offspring hatching when they start breeding early is just lack of parental experience. Across most birds, it's seen that first few years sometimes they're not able to bring like ensure the survival of any of the eggs laid at all, and then they get better at feeding them, protecting them from predators. So both parental experience and body condition contribute to birds feed which start earlier, reproducing at an earlier age, not doing so well. The next question is, what is breeding season start and end time? So that depends for different places. So places which experience a strong seasonality, they have a more pronounced breeding season. So in the Himalayas, there's very stark summer and winter. So in the mountainous regions, often most of the birds start breeding around end of March, early April, and then it ends by the end before monsoon really starts off. So end of June, July, or end of July. So that's the season. Whereas places like Bangalore in southern India, the seasonality is much lower. So you might see lots of birds breeding almost through the year. So it depends on how seasonal a habitat is. And also it differs between species. So for instance, vultures across the country breed between October and March. So they have a very different season. So there's difference between species and difference between places experiencing different levels of seasonality. Okay. All right. Someone's asked, can you please share the slides that were used? Amrita, maybe you can find out and let them know if it's
Uh,
possible.
yeah. So I can, I think already students have asked for the slides.
Yeah.
So we only have the lecture videos, and you can use the video transcripts which are available below the videos in the portal.
Okay.
So yeah, NPTEL doesn't allow to share the slides as such, but
Okay.
students can always use the transcript. Lecture transcripts are available in the below the videos. Yeah.
What is
Thank you.
this?
Sorry. Hello. Does someone want to ask any further?
Printer. Only one printer. There will be a PRR. Keep the gate. No, you.
Okay. Someone's asked, is there any book which describes the characteristics of all the bird species of India in detail? So one of the best books is actually the oldest, which is Salim Ali's handbooks. They have a lot of really good information uh, for all Indian species in really good detail, including morphological measurements, when they breed, the description of their eggs, chicks, and everything. So that is there, and then there is more recent handbooks of the birds of the world, which also have multiple volumes, and Indian birds are also covered in them. So that is also good. That those are also really good. And okay. Okay, someone's another question is about Darwin's finch's adaptive radiation. How can such a large change in beak shape happen in a time frame that's short enough to let the species survive? What drives the change? Is the mind of the bird that directs their body to change in different way, in a certain way. So that is not the case at all. So when I talk in case of Darwin's finches, what happened was there was such a sharp and very, very severe bout of drought. Yeah, as I explained when describing the study. So in 1976, there was a very severe bout of drought, and as a result of it, the plants that used to were growing on that particular island, they produced fruits and seeds which were very tough. So that's an adaptation that plants have to survive herbivory, or other animals eating those seeds. So when it's very stressful environment, they tend to produce really tough big seeds. So that's what happened, and as a result of it, only the birds Okay. Only some a certain among the population, the birds that had very bigger and stronger beaks were the ones which were able to break those seeds and eat. The others which had smaller beaks couldn't survive this drought because they couldn't break those tougher seeds and feed. And as a result of it, finally, what you were left with is a bunch of birds all with big beaks, which then reproduced, and thanks to inheritance of these traits, they produced offspring which also had bigger and tougher beaks. So and because these birds, they have a very short generation length, within a very short time, which is just 2 years, suddenly the number of birds in that population with big beaks increased rapidly. And that's why the mean size of beak lengths, because there were now more individuals with larger beaks in the population, that increased within 2 years' time. Okay. All right.
So,
Okay.
yeah, sorry, Mousumi. You have asked a question like I said I'll check and get back to, right? So that is also related with this how to measure the beak. I mean the penetratability.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that measured with? Is that respect to the beak length? Yeah,
Yes.
correct.
Yeah, it's respect to the beak length. Then another question is, what are the conditions birds are switched between R and K selected? Oh, that doesn't happen. So R and K selected, the strategies are species specific. So within the same species group, they are not going to change from one strategy to the other. Yeah, in fact, most large vertebrates are all K selected, like birds and mammals. Okay. All right. Fine. So I think I have covered my questions, Amrita, and Manjari is here, so maybe we can move on to her questions.
So there are some questions in the response sheet as well. Did you check that? I mean, I think there are two questions for you there. Did you got the link for the response sheet link?
Okay. I haven't seen that.
Okay. So there is one person, he said maybe he can email you if he is not available here.
Sure.
So
fine. I don't have access to the response sheet as well.
I see.
Okay.
I think that is in the calendar invite. If you're not able to get it, sorry.
I clicked on it, but I don't have access to it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So
you can send it to me later, and I'll answer
it is actually those questions are in the Google Doc, which you already read, I think.
Fine. Yeah, that I have finished. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Is there any questions? I mean, if any students want to get clarified or want to go further with any question, please unmute and ask. Or yeah. If no, then we can wait for Manjari to join.
Oh, she's already here.
Amrita.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. The questions that you had sent,
yes.
The list of questions, week 3 live session, I only have access to those questions. I don't have any other questions.
Yeah, I have added all the questions to that week 3.
Okay, so there are 3 questions. So is that what I deal with?
Yes,
And
yes.
discussion forum, etc. And this response sheet, again, for me, it is not accessible. So if there is
Okay.
something, please read it out for me.
Yeah, sure, please.
Okay.
You can start with the questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was one question on polygamy. If we compare B and C above, I suppose they mean for the ecological constraint hypothesis. Total number of resources are the same, but not unequal in distribution. Do we expect an increase in polygamy in C compared to B? So basically, between B and C, there is a difference in the way the resources are distributed. They are, in fact, unequally distributed in C, and in B, it is equal distribution. And as I mentioned in the lecture itself, that how the resources are distributed will affect the economics of defending these resources, and which may eventually affect the mating system. So yes, polygamy will depend on how the resources are distributed, and between B and C, although the number of resources are exactly the same, the way they are distributed are unequal in C and not in B. Then there's a follow-up question. Does each circle represent the territory of a single male? So yes. So basically, the point being that on an average, if we can imagine the territory size being similar between males, so then in case of B, each male will have access to resources equal to all other males, right? So there is no disparity there. On the other hand, if you see the schematic for graph C, you can see that the some males are having access to much larger number of resources, whereas some others have access to no resources at all in their territories. So that will determine the degree of polygamy. And yes, it will affect it. Is that clear, whoever had asked this question? Okay. I'll go on to the next question. Amrita, should I read the whole thing or just the question?
No, I think you can answer
So the
to the
question is, how
specific.
can one get good at identifying birds visually and by auditory capacity? Are there any books or study materials? So the best way to improve uh, your identification skill is to be actually out in the field and with practice. And no amount of study resources, no bird book, no AI models can help you become a better birder. You'll have to do it yourself. So you have to really dive in, go out in the field, identify birds by sight and sound, and it is typically by practice. Of course, as we know, there are several field guides that will assist you in making identification better. Yeah. And also there are now various apps. For instance, Merlin Bird ID is there, which can be used for IDing birds using sound. But for Indian birds, it is not completely reliable. They make a lot of mistakes. Even if you make recordings and use Raven Learning Pro Detector, we know we have already done this work. We know that they make errors up to 60% of the time. So I would recommend the best way to learn is to actually go out in the field and do it by practice. There is another question. It says that why is it unethical to photograph bird nests? Well, it is unethical to photograph bird nests simply because when we are taking photographs, we are paying a lot of attention to these bird nests, which also attract the attention of predators, which can result in these nests actually failing. It can also result in the breeding pair getting stressed out and them abandoning these nests. So there are various now published data which shows that the probability of predation increases when there are nest observers. Okay. Then someone asked that why did nobody seriously study songs in female birds? And why do you think it took two female scientists to do this research? Well, there is a Very simple answer. In many species, male birds are far more conspicuously glamorous, both in all kinds of traits, not only in their plumage, but also in their song. And especially in the temperate regions where most of these studies actually initiated mostly because of funding, there is very strong pronounced uh, differences between males and females, which people have linked to seasonality, which breaks down in the tropics, is what has been argued, where even females can have sexually enhanced ornamental traits, both visually and acoustically, and people just didn't look hard enough. That was, I would say, that was the main reason. There is a tendency of all of us to, be in our comfort zone, so and not challenge traditional knowledge. So back in the days, most people worked on male birds, and they found a lot of interesting traits. And in many species, especially in the temperate regions, the females did not have very bright color plumage, nor did they have very conspicuous sound signals. And that kind of, that inertia kind of carried on. That I think it's just as simple as that. Amruta, are there any other questions? I don't see any other questions in this document.
Yeah, I think you already, answered the questions from the Google response sheet and discussion forum as well. So if any of you have any doubts regarding the lecture, please use the live chat, or you can unmute and ask.
There
Yeah,
is
I think
one
there are,
question
yeah,
about
yes.
species singing different songs in different areas. How do the songbirds learn to develop song? There is going to be one entire lecture on this. So I think maybe you can wait for that, because it is discussed there in quite great details. So Meenakshi, can you just wait till we reach that point? And to answer very briefly, yes, there is a genetic component as well. And there is a certain template even when birds are learning the songs. Even in birds where the songs are learned, even there is a certain template which is innate. Then Nitin has asked, when the birds abandon their nest during a cycle, do they build another one within the time that is left for laying the eggs? If not, what happens to the eggs of the ongoing cycle? So we know for a fact that even if the nests are, if the nest fails, if it has been predated, depending on the physiology of the bird, of course, they can lay multiple clutches within the same breeding season. So yes, that can happen. Of course, there is a physiological limit to how many times you can actually lay eggs. So, if there's multiple failures, of course, it's that breeding season is gone for the bird, which also links us to the same question as to why it is unethical to photograph nest, because nest failure can be a very stressful event for the birds. What happens to the eggs of ongoing cycle? I'm not sure what it means. So do you mean that what happens to the eggs which are already there in some nests? If they are not being incubated, if they are not being taken care of course, they are not going to hatch. But if the female has eggs, has fertile eggs, then she will lay it. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Amrita, can you just check once if in the response sheet if there are any questions that Mousumi and I have missed, because neither of us have access to it?
There are only 3 questions in that. I think both of you answered to that.
Okay, all right,
Yeah,
fantastic.
Yes.
Anybody else? Is there something you want to discuss, or any comments, or any experience you want to share? Please feel free.
I think There is a question in the chat.
Why do the same species have different breeding periods in southern India? You mean why are the times different? 2 months early. Yeah, I mean, this is, well, you tell me. In Mohali, I mean, we right now it's extremely cold still, and we are all wearing jackets and sweater and multiple layers and caps and hoodies, and I'm sure people down south are not wearing these jackets. So, there is huge, I mean, India is a big country. There's a huge climate gradient, and the seasons are, we say that we all have, these forces, but the seasons are not arriving at the same time, which will tell you how phenological changes in vegetation, in breeding times for all animals, not just birds, is going to be different in North India versus Southern India. So that is why it is, because the climates are very different. No, are you saying Chennai and Mohali have the same weather in January? I will just turn on my video for a second. I'm wearing 4 layers actually. It is quite cold. And the minimum is, oh, you mean Trivandrum and Chennai? In Trivandrum and Chennai, the quail breed at 2 different times? I have no idea. Is it true? Do you have some data on this? And how different is this? Can you tell? What do you mean by early? Is it by a few days? Is it by a few weeks? I am not sure actually. In March, we also have breeding in Mohali, not only in Trivandrum. So, in many birds, there are multiple. Well, some birds breed all throughout the year. Some birds breed. There is one breeding period between Feb to June, and then there is a minor peak around post monsoon around August, September, October. So maybe you are observing them at 2 different times. I don't know. Yeah. Why dial birds are more active in full moon? I don't know.
Manjari, there's a question about ethogram earlier.
Mandar, yes. Does it require a lot of experience to build an ethogram? Is it the work of research-oriented scholars and not for a... No, in fact, that is a fantastic thing about ecology and behavior. I mean, that is exactly why many of you are studying this, because several of the things is not something that can be done only by people who have trained specifically in that. So there's a lot of, ecology and behavior is deeply rooted in natural history, which is basically observations of organisms in their natural environment. And building an ethogram, unless you are doing so for specific kind of controlled lab conditions, and the natural behavior of the organisms can be observed and can be used to build the ethogram by anybody. There is no specific special training which is required. So it is for everyone. Everyone can do this. You can do it. Children can do it. Yeah. Well, I have there's a question on why I study jungle babblers. I have talked about it in various forums, so you can find it online. But in brief, since I'm interested in social behavior and primarily to understand how acoustic communication has evolved in different species, the selective forces that drive signal evolution, especially to understand how sociality mediates evolution of acoustic communication. That is why I studied jungle babblers. These are social birds, and while they are not very pretty to look at, they have a very interesting vocal repertoire of calls which they use to mediate their group interactions. And that is why I work on social babblers, including jungle babblers. So some Mandar is asking, we will not know what each behavior is called. That is absolutely fine. So the way, at least I tell my students who are like, first and second year undergrads, that when you go out, say for instance, we are trying to teach them how to observe different kinds of behavior. The only and most important criteria is to observe the behaviors in an unbiased manner and not to impose our anthropomorphic views when studying animal behavior. So anthropomorphism is a real problem where we interpret the behavior of animals in terms of our own behavior. So if you're seeing a bird do a certain thing, say for instance, it is pecking on the ground, it is very tempting to think that it is actually foraging. It may not be foraging at all. It might be a courtship ritual. So the best way to do this is to actually make uh, detailed notes about every single behavior that you observe. And that is exactly how the ethogram comes into being. You write what exactly the animal was doing and what was happening in the environment. And then you can give it a code. And that code can be completely, it does not even have to have a um, English language or Hindi or any other language. It can be just a code number. It can be BYX or whatever. You give it some context, describe that behavior. And typically, the way we understand the function of the behavior is only after we have conducted sufficient number of observations, oftentimes controlled experiments also in the field, to be able to interpret what is the function of the behavior. So it is not something that you should jump to. The function, assigning function to the behavior and using names or codes for behavior which imply certain functions is not something that is recommended. Unless and until you have, beyond reasonable doubt, that this is play behavior, say for instance, or this behavior is particularly specifically, it is actually finding food and you have seen it extract food and consume it. So I would say the best way is to write detailed note and give it a neutral code for the behavior. And only after you have sufficient observations and if needed experiments you have carried out, then you give it a name which implies function. Otherwise, don't do it.
Okay, ma'am. Thanks a lot. Got it.
Amruta, there is a question about if somebody misses a live session.
Yeah. So they can always get the recorded session in the portal. So they'll release the live session recorded video.
There's another question, I think. Are there any species where females do courtship dances? So, courtship rituals, like I mentioned in my lecture as well, is typically we think of it as something which typically males exhibit, right? And not just courtship dance, any kind of signaling, right? We think it is male specific, but that is not necessarily true. It is in polyandrous species, females can exhibit behaviors which, and it's not only in birds, even in fishes and other species, females can also exhibit courtship behavior. And in some species, especially in monogamous species, as you know, um, both males and females participate in these courtship dances, as is true in many, water birds. The Sarus crane being one example, which you may have heard of, that both males and females and both the pair together exhibits these courtship rituals. So yeah, this can happen in females as well. The point being that why is it far more common to see it in males and why not so commonly in females? That is what is the paradox. And that is explained by, why like anisogamy, and how anisogamy is a good explanation for seeing this sex bias in courtship displays. I'll just scroll to see if I have missed any other. Did I answer that? I hope I have answered. If you have any other question, you can.
Yes, you did, Dr. Jain. I'm just typing. Can I just ask you something?
Yes, please go ahead. Yes.
So this thing about the males being, more flamboyant and so on, and them doing the courtship dances, is that itself ascribing masculinity to those birds? Is that itself anthropomorphic, or is there a biological reason? I mean,
No,
apart from
absolutely. No. So the very fact that we only see peacocks dance, okay,
Yeah.
and peahens do not dance, and the word is dance. Now the
Yes.
point is that is this really a good term to use? We know that this is basically as close to a dance-like signal, okay, and because we have limited vocabulary, we borrow these terms, right? But at the
Yes.
same time, we say it is the display of the peacock when we call it a dance only when we know for, now decades that this is actually a courtship dance, and the function is now known. Yeah.
Okay.
So we use this term very carefully. For instance, if you are studying a new species of bird or a new species of insect, you will not ascribe it. That would be anthropomorphism. So we never do that. So you will have a neutral term. It's only when the function is unambiguously assigned, that is when we use these terms. Now, is it like assuming that only the, are we sort of glorifying males and sort of, as I said, the real danger is when you don't study the other species, the other sex. So people just did not examine, people just did not look at song in females. So, and you imagine and you assume that if it is singing, it must be male. Okay.
Yes.
So that is the problem.
That is the problem.
That is a very big problem. Yes.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dilip.
All right, bye. I've got to get off. Thank you.
Okay, have a safe flight.
Okay.
You're muted, Manjari. Can't hear you.
Ranjita, can you see the video now? It's just that we have all switched off our videos. So we are here. Yeah. Amruta, is there anything else?
No, I think if students want to follow up with their questions, always can use the discussion forum, and yeah. So I'll remain if there are any unanswered questions in the discussion forum. So professors will, I'll remind the professors if there any unanswered questions. So students can always put their questions in the discussion forum. So I think we'll wind up the session if no other questions. Yeah. It's a little bit early.
How to calculate breeding success. Mousumi, do you want to?
How to calculate breeding success?
Basically, yeah.
You please go ahead.
Well, when we study, say for instance, we have been monitoring jungle babblers and we look at breeding behavior. One of the things that we were asking was, are bigger groups, Rupam, I think you're unmuted. Can you mute yourself? So Rupam, you need to mute yourself. So yeah. So basically, we asked one question, one very simple question, that do bigger groups have higher breeding success? Now, when we looked at the number of chicks that fledge out, the number of eggs that are laid, it seemed like within the breeding season, there was no difference between bigger groups and smaller groups. They were exactly, like roughly on an average, the same. But when you look at annual fledgling productivity, that in an entire year, given that they can breed multiple times, when you look at that, then we find that there are differences. So within a singular breeding event, there is no difference in the breeding success, but you can define breeding success as the singular breeding event, or you can define it as the annual breeding success. So it is the time scale at which you are measuring it. So you have to define it. Okay. So it can be, you can now look at clutch size and you can see that whether, well, some species may be having a larger clutch, or well, some individuals in the population have a larger clutch size than other. That could be one measure. You could look at how many actually hatch out, how many actually fledge out, or you can look at it for the entire period, like, annually, or in their lifetime. Breeding success is also what some things people, ecologists do measure lifetime breeding success as well, which specifically speaking, that truly is what Darwinian fitness is. What is the your contribution to the next gene pool. Okay. So it really is something that you need to define. Mousumi, is there something you
Yeah,
need to add?
we have
Yeah.
covered it. Yeah, there's another question about play behavior.
Yeah, Soumya, so this it is one of those behaviors which are very hard to assign, and one has to be very careful. So, for instance, in jungle babblers, they have very clear play behavior, and if you actually look at the behavior, at first it appears as if it is aggression. It appears that they are actually attacking each other, and it's only with very long-term observations we now know that this behavior is strictly within group members who are part of the same group. We know that because we had banded individuals. We know that this behavior is never exhibited across groups. Also, what seems like a peck and a jump and like clawing at each other, when you see, you will realize the difference. When you actually see an intergroup fight, the degree of aggression is very different. So in case of play behavior, they do peck, but they peck very gently, like they would do when they are grooming, allo grooming. They do claw at each other, but it is also done very gently, and you can see the consequence of it is none of the individuals are harmed, and then they fly back together. And this is typically exhibited just pre-roosting. So just before roosting, they seem to engage in this kind of behavior. And this is not only in birds, in social birds, in many non-human primates exhibit play behavior. You must have seen it even, I mean, not only primates, you must have seen it even in dogs, that they exhibit play behavior. So it is tough to assign, but it is only through long and patient observations, and when you have actually identified the function, that we assign the term play. Otherwise, it can be extremely anthropomorphic. So assigning it is very tricky. It is not easy.
Is someone unmuted? You want to ask the question or no? Yeah. So there are
Someone
no
has
questions
asked,
in the.
I
Okay.
think
Yeah.
there is one question that Merlin is not being able to identify
Large
crows, large-billed crow. Yeah, I was telling you We have actually checked it, and even very common birds. I'm not saying that they can't do it for any birds. That's not true. They can, and in fact, they do a very good job in many cases. But we know that many Indian birds, Merlin actually does not do a very good job in identification, and it is not just a function of how close you were to the signaler. Even if you are right next to the bird that is signaling, they misidentify all the time. So yeah, it's possible.
Yeah, in fact, we had an interaction with a team which runs Merlin, and it is about the database that they have. So they don't have good quality recordings for many of the species in the country.
Yeah. In fact, I met this person, and I kind of asked them what really is going on. And then this is exactly what they said, that we will give you all the recorders, Manjari. Please take these recorders and use them, but please also annotate it for us. And they want seasoned birders to actually sit and annotate these recordings, which they use for their classifiers. So it's coming mostly from machine learning algorithms. And what the algorithms work on, the bread and butter for the algorithm is annotated data, which is really lacking from some departments.
For identification, we don't have any other reliable alternative to Merlin right now. I'm aware of.
Amruta, I will actually have to leave. At 6, I have to take my daughter to a doctor's appointment. So
Mhm.
if
Yeah.
there is nothing else, if there are any other pressing questions, is it possible to get it by email and then I can address them?
Sure, sure. So I can send it to you by, are you available on the discussion forum? Are you getting emails? No,
No.
I see. I think for that you have to sign into the NPTEL portal. Yeah, I can text you the details.
Yeah,
So
or you
once
can
you
just
sign
email.
in,
This works very well for me.
sure,
Just one Google Sheet, if you share with me, in which you can keep
sure,
putting all these
posting.
questions, I
Yeah,
will be able to address it.
sure, I can do that.
Yeah, can you
Okay.
please do that for me as well? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. So is that okay if I share the same Google Doc and I'll comment you? Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
fine
yeah.
with me.
Thank you. Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi,
Thank you for
Mousumi,
joining.
good to see you. Okay, thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Thanks, Amruta.
Thank you, Manjari and Mousumi. Thank you, all the students who joined. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
पाँच तक के चलो কি বলছো বেরোনোর তো ইচ্ছে আছে দেখছি
তাহলে ওই প্রিন্ট আউট আসতে হবে